I'll give you a week 1 update on where we are on the Pinephone with some specific tests that I made. There's so many changes being made, daily in fact, so what could be running one day could be broken the next. But it shows the amount of activity. So let's see where we are so far, coming up next. Now, before I start talking about the problems and testing that is occurring on the Pinephone, some troll is going to make some comment about how we Linux phone enthusiasts are so stupid for having such low-grade expectations about backward tech. Oh, this is so 2011, some kid would say. Well, to those idiots who have no understanding, stay with your zucking spy phones and enjoy having 24-hour surveillance of your life in the hands of Google, Apple, and Facebook. And leave this discussion for the grown-ups. Sorry for the rant. I just had to say that after seeing these comments on my videos. Now, a second interesting event happened with the Pinephone. Apparently, a small batch of phones did not get shipped in time before the Chinese New Year. The phones are made in Shenzhen, which is next to Hong Kong, and the phones are actually shipped from Hong Kong to wherever you are. Well, unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, the borders to China have been closed. So shipment has been impossible. So some of you with orders don't even have your phone yet. It's crazy that our Linux phone project is right in the midst of all this coronavirus drama. Well, luckily I have my phone, and don't worry about rushing because the software is not yet ready anyway. Okay, let's summarize what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to show you a brief comparison of each OS, what runs and what doesn't. I have installed Ubuntu Touch, Phosh with PostmarketOS, Plasma Mobile with PostmarketOS, Plasma Mobile with Neon, Loon OS, and I have not yet tried Nemo, which is the open source portion of Sailfish OS. Next, I did a power management test on some of these OSs. And you will find the results interesting. This is to see if the Pinephone has the same overheating and battery discharging problem as on the Librem 5. I then tested the Wi-Fi kill switch. I will tell you the surprising results on that as well. Then I will summarize what is known to work and not to work in general among the different OSs. It takes so much time to test all of these, so I just have to discuss a limited number of things each week, or the videos will be way too long, folks. Okay, let's start with the first topic, which is a quick evaluation of each OS. To make this clearer, I'm going to give each OS a grade like this. OS functionality. This is how you can change settings in the OS to modify the behavior of the phone in ways expected by normal phone users. The app ecosystem relates to the apps and the ability to share apps, and if there are existing apps or an app store. Stability. Does it crash? Does it hang? Does it present you with a screen with no way out so you have to reboot? Phone functionality. Here we're talking about texting, calling, LTE data, Wi-Fi, camera, sensors, the usual things expected of the phone. UX, my subjective reaction to how the user experience is on the phone. Modern phones probably can be classified as a 10, so we'll see if these new OSs come close. And mind you, these are my opinions. Some people will, of course, have different preferences, so you don't have to agree. Also, some are ready soon and some will not be ready. So these are short-term grades and will change significantly, probably each month. So let's talk about Ubuntu Touch, the most ready OS of the bunch. I did most of my testing on build 225. These builds are daily, so whatever I say may be significantly out of date in a week. So make sure to watch whatever newer version of this video is. I'm using Ubuntu Touch as my daily driver phone using a Nexus 5, so it should be no surprise that it is mostly working. And truly it is impressive to compare against the other OSs because it seems so far ahead in so many aspects. The OS itself has built-in tweak management that have been standard on Ubuntu Touch. Things like tweaking the font size, even changing some themes. But there are issues specific to the Pinephone. For example, the graphics acceleration is not there yet. The smoothness you can see on a Nexus 5 is still a bit jagged here. The major difference is that this version of Ubuntu Touch is the first to support Wayland. It has a new display driver, and the Pinephone also has a new GPU, which is a Mali 400 and an open source Lima driver. But how they interact with the Lima driver may be different. According to Vasily, who is a Lima dev, the UB ports in Plasma Mobile project do not use the latest Lima APIs, and this may affect performance. I presume this is just some upstream driver for Plasma Mobile that they need to implement, but Ubuntu Touch uses a new version of Mir from Canonical, so they're dependent on what Canonical does. And an interesting observation too, when I tested Wi-Fi kill switches, and I'll discuss this later in the video, the screen was flickering on Ubuntu Touch, but when I reverted back to a fresh flashed SD card, it was back to normal. So from an OS functionality point of view, Ubuntu Touch is very advanced in the pack, and I expect most people would use this first. The other thing that's demonstrably advanced about Ubuntu Touch is the ecosystem. It has a well-developed open store with lots of apps. Most are web apps, but it's a functional list from navigation to cloud music. And my own app Brax.me for messaging is on there as well. Nothing comes close at the moment, as long as we exclude the paid version of Sailfish OS running Android apps. The UX of Ubuntu Touch is a very specific taste kind of thing. I made a video discussing the UX, which are choices made by Canonical, dominant side edge swiping for the OS, and small fonts, something that is not copied by any of the other OSs. But it works. Now, from a stability point of view, Ubuntu Touch goes through a daily build cycle. The last build I used for this video, 2.25, had a lot of bugs that didn't exist in 2.24, so someone was experimenting. There were times I got locked out with no keyboard to use. I couldn't type in a password, so I had to reboot. But bugs are constantly getting fixed, just new ones show up. The activity is at a high pitch, so you will expect changes daily. So my UT grade is OS functionality 8, which is the top score. Ecosystem is 8, again a top score. Stability is at 7, functionality is at 5, and the UX at 7. Phosh looks very clean. It doesn't really have much in functional apps, but as far as how the interface works for the OS, it's very functional and the cleanest looking of all with a modern feel. It also has more power management settings than the others, so that was unique about it. But there are so many UX bugs with the responsive screens. Many screens were oversized, so you can get locked out without an exit because you can't reach buttons. Rotation worked by switching out, but not by sensor. The other OSs didn't even bother with rotation yet. So this is progressing nicely. The browser didn't work for me, so still some major issues to sort out. So my Phosh grade is OS functionality 4, ecosystem 1, stability 4, functionality 6, which is the top score, and UX is 8, which is tied for the top score. Plasma Mobile was really clunky for me. The interface was a bit confusing in behavior. I think this has potential, but the most noticeable thing for me that probably increased my irritation level was that the UI was very laggy in its response. Is this a graphics driver problem or something else? All of the touch interfaces were not snappy. There must be like a time delay where the UI decides how you clicked or swiped. Well, something is not right. This requires some more foundational work, I think, on the touch interface. And for that reason, I gave it a lower grade. This could easily change if they know what the issue is. It also crashed several times for me. Or, like Phosh, it will display a window that is out of bounds on the display. So lots of little things. The problem is that there's so many little things, which tells me that this OS will need a few more months to mature. Once the touch behavioral quirks are solved, this has the potential for working fine. It has kind of an Android feel to it. It's not as clean as Phosh in my opinion, but I still gave it a good UX grade. Its main current issue is stability. It was hard to even test the battery when I couldn't even easily check the battery level. So I'll wait for some more of this to have some growth. So my Plasma Mobile grade is OS Functionality 3, Ecosystem 1, since there's no app anything, Stability 3, Functionality 5, and UX 7. So it's not a top on anything. LuneOS came from the original Web OS or the Palm OS project from back in the old days. So a lot of the standard apps got ported. It seems the most complete with built-in apps, though there's still the issue of new apps made by independent developers. Only Ubuntu Touch has the most of those. Of course, our needs are the same from Palm OS days with email, calendars, contacts, and address books, so all that got automatically handled. Lots of tweaks to the OS environment are available too, since again, those were included from Palm. They also have a repository for third-party apps, so this could be good in the future. This could be the closest to Ubuntu Touch in terms of usability and as a standard mobile device once it gets stable. However, it was very hard to test LuneOS, so I'll have to try a later version to give my full input. It was crashing every few minutes. I couldn't even do a power management test. And the thing that irked me the most was how locked down it was. More so than Ubuntu Touch. It had no terminal app, at least one that I could find. So again, another OS that just needs more time. Can't rush it. It'll ripen properly given time. But there will be debate on whether this phone will be like a Linux phone as we would perceive a Librem 5 to be, for example. Something this locked down may get categorized separately. If I don't even know what kernel is here, or if there's no terminal built in, I may be reluctant to build apps for it. Also, though I give this a high score on the UX side, it uses old style icons versus the newer flat design. This is easily changed, but it currently gives it an old-fashioned look, definitely 2011. So my LuneOS grade is OS Functionality 7, Ecosystem 6, Stability the lowest at 1, Functionality is 5, UX tied for top at 8. Here's a chart showing all my grades and you can compare each one. As you can see, Ubuntu Touch is ahead in 3 categories. Phosh is ahead in phone functionality. And though I didn't get to test it, you can see that there's a new video today about making a call using Phosh. And the UX is good for Phosh, and I prefer the simplicity of it and the larger controls of LuneOS. So those two are actually tied for the highest scores in UX. Again, these will change week by week, so don't worry too much if your favorite is behind at the moment. Remember that Pine 64 will ship with the most ready OS by default. So the next issue I wanted to study was power management. This is a big deal for those exposed to the faux pas with the Librem 5. It was a challenge to even run the Librem 5 for 2 hours because it was running so hot. If you plug in the charger, the Pinephone does run hot, and I can feel the heat on the Quectel modem. I don't know if it's just conducting heat from other sources inside, since it is the biggest piece of exposed metal, but it is hot when plugged in, and it has a noticeable warm spot when on the battery. Anyway, I did a brief power test to see how much power was consumed in 1 hour on all the OSs that I tried. I kept the conditions the same. The screen was at half brightness and I booted on charger. Then I left it on standby and then checked the battery level around 6 times within an hour. In all cases, the phone was only warmish. But to compare against an Ubuntu Touch Nexus 5, the Nexus 5 was completely cold. So some power is still being wasted. In any case, when you look at the chart, you will see that there is a big difference with Phosh. Phosh, as I mentioned, has some extra power saving features on their user interface, and it shows up in here with a much more significant runtime than the rest of the OSs. So whatever Phosh implemented in power saving can be copied by the other OSs to lower the battery consumption. I am told that further changes are in the works here, and a 12-hour life is the current next level expectation. We'll see if we make progress on that next week. The final test I did this week was to see if the Wi-Fi kill switch worked. I have not yet been able to get a successful LTE with my carrier T-Mobile. Some others have reported success with AT&T and Net 10, or T-Mobile and Net 10, but it didn't work for me. If I can verify that some other carrier works, I'll get that SIM card and then try it and test it. In the meantime, I wanted to test the kill switch, and the one that was easy to test was the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi pretty much works on all the OSs without doing anything special. So I turned off the Wi-Fi via kill switch, and in fact, after a reboot, all the S's could not detect the Wi-Fi. But here's the problem. When I flipped the dip switch back, the OSs never found the Wi-Fi again. So it seems like once the kernel reports that there's no Wi-Fi hardware, the OSs never look for it again. It was not possible to detect it dynamically. This looks to be something that the OSs were never configured to expect and needs to be addressed. Or maybe it's in the kernel. I don't know. It's an issue on something. The only way I got Wi-Fi to work again was to reflash a new SD card. So let's talk about what's outstanding so far and what progress has been made. A couple days ago, I saw that PostmarketOS did a kernel update, and I saw discussion about the issue of audio routing for making calls. I think this was addressed on Phosh, since now you can see that there is a video about Phosh making a call. LTE data works for others, not for me. SMS incoming works for others. I have no working SIM card, so I can't test that. However, the holdback on the phone calls, again, is that audio routing, which Phosh was able to implement first. Though calls can be made by signaling the modem manually, you can't hear the audio, and this was apparently a problem with the Pine64 kernel. So something had to be fixed upstream on the A64 chip. This has been distributed now in a Linux 5.5 kernel, and is included in a download on Phosh. So Phosh is making headway here on the functional side, and possibly because these are similar issues to the Librem 5. This means that hopefully next week, some of these changes will make it to Ubuntu Touch as well. There's a whole bunch of test scripts in Ubuntu Touch so you can test the modem functionality. And unfortunately, I'm not able to run those tests with a SIM card, but sounds to me like it's getting close. The power saving is a significant issue, so I will watch for that progress. None of the OSs are demonstrating a running camera yet, as far as I know, although the command line access to it has been demonstrated. The rotation sensor is not detected by anyone yet. The GPU acceleration does not appear to be in use by most of the OSs, but Loon OS is surprisingly smooth. I don't know what Linux kernel is being used on Loon OS or what driver, since it looks like a black box at the moment. And I thought Ubuntu Touch was locked down, but they're doing something right on the graphics since it is smooth like an Android. Maybe they're using the blob driver. From my understanding, being in close contact with Lucas from Pine64, Ubuntu Touch will likely have solutions for the majority of the issues, possibly by next week, which is the end of February. The phone function side will probably be ready simultaneously for all, give or take a few days for them to implement it. The other OSs though have some significant work to be done still, and I think some of them are months away. Now, Phosh could stick to the basics and just stop there, and that may be achievable. It at least appears to be stabilizing as far as the basic functionality goes, and could soon be a 7 in stability, plus all the functional things. Now, at the time of this video, I wasn't able to get an installation of Nemo going. Nemo is a scaled down version of Sailfish that is based on the open source portion of Sailfish. It's bare bones, though Sailfish is a mature OS if you buy the commercial version. The issue though is that Sailfish is only partially open source, and many of the apps that they provide to their paying customers will not be in that open source. So this could be an issue for some. Anyway, things are moving very fast and it is exciting to watch. There's a frenzy at each OS. Plasma Mobile is having some sort of hackathon to quickly fix all their issues as well. So they're going to catch up fast with all the fun functionality side. Ubuntu Touch, of course, already has so many volunteers and they can get a very professional OS ready in line with their current Android conversions like the Nexus 5. So stay tuned for the next update on this topic. Hopefully by the end of February or near it, meaning next week or so, we will have something major to report. Now, if you want to keep track of all these events, please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you get notifications on what's new. And thank you for watching.